Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
Faith Positive Nation, some of us just wake up in the morning with ideas. Some of them God-inspired, others inspired by what we ate the night before. But all of us wake up with ideas in the morning, and many of us, about 5% of the general population, are wired to try to execute those ideas and make them become, reality. And so we here in Faith Positive Nation are very blessed today to welcome someone who has the unusual and most enviable position of helping people who have ideas to create businesses and to help them birth those businesses and make them sustainable so that they begin right, all out of one's divine design and calling from God himself. Faith Positive Nation, meet my good friend Seth Wade, who is the Executive Director for the Entrepreneurs Center for Innovation at Liberty University. Seth, welcome to Faith Positive Radio, man. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Joey.
And if you recognize Seth's voice from before we began the video for Faith Positive Television, he actually has been a guest on Faith Positive Radio before and belongs to, therefore, an elite group of business people, Christian business people who've been out here more than once. I think there might be one or two beyond you. So that's it, buddy. How does that make you feel?
Well, it just means you're probably running out of people to speak to.
Your humility is inspiring, my friend. It's so inspiring. So you work with entrepreneurs by and large who are, I can say this because I are one, weird people. I mean, we're 5% of the population. We come up with an idea for a business and we think that people actually might want to engage with us around that business, this unique idea. What is the landscape like for you each day when you pop out of bed and say, oh boy, I get to do what this morning?
Yeah, I think I have the fortunate opportunity to sow into that unique population. I get to serve people that look and feel a lot like you and a lot like myself, but that are attempting to do something that is extremely difficult. And so for me, when I get up in the morning, I'm thinking about who can I serve? Who can I help? How can we build better behaviors and habits around forming and launching and growing business enterprise? And that's an incredibly exciting thing to be able to do and say.
Especially since no two are just alike. I mean, there's some established habits, or as we talk about them in Faith Positive Nation, core practices, right? The 5 core practices: perceive, conceive, believe, achieve, and receive. Can you tell I've said those before? We know that, but each one in terms of customization to each person and how each person perceives, for instance, focuses on the positive God's doing and filters out the negative. That's different. So you have an adventurous spirit in your work then, and are constantly trying to find your balance between what you know works for entrepreneurs and how this person's adapting it.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of getting intimately familiar with human nature and the human psyche. And so businesses are soulless entities. They're legally recognized, and they file taxes, and they have an EIN, which is just nothing more than a social security number for that.
For a business, right? Yeah.
So if they're soulless, they lack personality, and they lack character, and they lack all those things. So they adopt those things from the person or people that founded them. And so those businesses start to take on those traits via their culture, their early culture, which usually lasts, or at least forms of it last for the lifetime of the entity. And so because of that and shaping that culture, which ultimately trumps, any of your strategies or your activities at the end of the day, your culture is that foundational element that you build early on, right? In order to accomplish the service with your business of some problem need of a particular people group, right? A target. So being able to be involved in that, it is always unique. There's always something new to be learned just around the corner. I think that's the thing that continues to motivate the entrepreneur. It definitely motivates me, is you just never know what's right around that corner to be learned or to be able to do and serve others. And I get to do that very directly with entrepreneurs, which is it's really kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. So you really draw up alongside them and walk with them through that. Now, the unique thing, at least in my own experience, and I think in yours too, because we've talked about this before, is, the first benefit of a faith-positive work style is that you increase your faith. Man, it takes a lot of faith to be an entrepreneur and start your own business, doesn't it? So what's the faith journey like as you observe entrepreneurs engage?
Yeah, I think there's two, there's a litany of unique character traits or characteristics of an entrepreneur that you can go out there and find on all sorts of great studies. Two in particular that really jump out to me, given that question, is, the first is the ability to identify opportunity, which is the initial thing that you have to be able to do. That's that idea in the morning that you're talking about. So, you hear a lot of people in the entrepreneurial vein or that are aspiring entrepreneurs, I'm really passionate about this. And that cuts both ways. And so that's the first faith building moment. You find a lot of people that are passionate about something that they really like or enjoy. And that's nothing wrong with that.
It's wonderful, but
there is a big but behind that. The but is, well, if that's your driving motivation and you're just really passionate about something that's intrinsic to you, over time that becomes prideful, arrogant, and narcissistic.
Yes, very much so.
That's problematic. If you're really passionate about serving others, congratulations, you just found the passion of Christ.
Yes.
So when you're looking at something that really meets a need for a people group.
A demonstrated need that people know they have, which was much of what Christ responded to. I mean, he healed the sick, right?
That's right.
The lame, and they had a demonstrated need. So it's like you're involved in this healing ministry with people. They have a problem or a need, and so you're solving it.
That's right. And so if you can overlap something that you really like with that, then great. I mean, that's great.
That's a home run there. That's the intersection of your passion and the world's need, right?
Sure. And you're looking for that. Now, the interesting thing is that as you're looking to serve others, you find that your passions change. Right? And so those issues of others become your passions. And so then you find a spot.
And that's servant leadership at its finest, right? Because you identify, you apply your skill set to what other people need.
That's right. You move beyond the narcissistic passion that immature maybe entrepreneurs have. You really moved into serving others. So that's kind of the first big faith, building moment that you see within successful entrepreneurs. The second is this ability to deal with just ambiguity, just the uncertainty of the whole scenario. Am I going to be able to get paid next month? I hope so.
If not, how am I going to eat? How am I going to explain this to my spouse and kids? I remember when we started this business, our older daughter was in high school. And so I made the announcement, I was leaving my full-time work and coming home. We had our little family meeting, and I went through all this, I thought, just perfectly crafted presentation to my family, right? And the high school daughter looks at me and says, "Dad, are we still going to be able to buy me those new blue jeans I want?"
Right.
Everything is specific and local, right? So there is that ambiguity, that uncertainty that I think builds your faith the most, at least as mine and other entrepreneurs like yourself, and we've talked about this before too, that it takes that increase in faith, right, to trust God, especially in manna times, because we're the Hebrews. Hey, at least I was a slave to that corporate job where I had 3 squares a day and a place to get buried, right? That's what they said.
That's right.
But I don't know where the next meal's coming from, and so I have to trust God in a radical way.
Right.
And not everybody's cut out for that, right?
Yeah. I think there's an element of your design and how you're...
Yeah, your divine design, right.
And then there's an element of the sanctification that goes into that and how you're growing and leaning into that. And I think that was definitely true for me. When you lose your tethering, you lose the ability, right, to remain steadfast in the storm, right? when you lose your rudder, when you lose your anchor, whatever it might be, and for us as Christians, that's our faith, right? That's our relationship with Christ. When you lose that, and so you're really forced to have a strong tethering if you're going to be successful in the entrepreneurial and innovation game. The second thing is that you really have to get introspective in that tethering. You've got to be prayerful. You got to stay in the Word. You've got to do all those things that, keep your faith strong. And so there's a growing in that. There's a maturing in that. And the next interesting thing is you start to realize that you're extremely inadequate. And if you're inadequate, then there has to be a solution for that. And the solution, if you're inadequate, can't come from yourself. So you start to look to God for answers. And then those answers typically show up in other people. So you start to get really, really good at asking for help and relying on others and building trust and providing service back. It just all comes full service.
It does, man. But this is what you're describing is diametrically opposed to what we're taught by the world.
Right.
You're supposed to be a self-made man, which means you just got to gut it out. You just got to tough it up. What's that phrase? Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. You got to do it. So if you're not man or woman enough to make it happen, then you shrink and you fade and the idea doesn't come to fruition. But what you've just described is so well, Seth, is it's why I think Christians have a leg up on other people around the world who aren't Christians in terms of starting businesses and having that faith to grow. I mean, I was a Christian before I started the business. You were a Christian before you started your business. But man, I got to tell you, when you're talking about tethering and introspection, one of the things that we oftentimes discover as Christian business people is that we're tethered to the wrong anchor point. I'm tethered to the corporation, right? And so that's my be all and end all. And Paul said it best, when I'm weak, then he's strong.
That's right.
Man, that takes a lot of humility to admit that. But when you're down there and you don't know where the next one's coming from, you look up and you find yourself face to face with God. And it's at that moment where I think your faith really increases. At least it has for me and so many other business people that I know.
Yeah, I think, when you look at Christ, you see something really, really interesting in how he ran his business. When you're in a large established type of firm, you think very causally in life. You have a defined end goal. You're in a market. It's mature. Your corporation is likely mature in that market. And you kind of know what levers mathematically to pull to kind of make some things happen organically within that firm. However, when you're an entrepreneur or, if you're Christ with 12 employees, you have to start thinking really effectual. You have to think about, what are the unique things that I have to offer? What are the unique resources that I might have at my fingertips? What are then the second question, who do I know and what do they need? And what can we do together? And so that kind of goes through your faith positive kind of mantra right there, where you start to perceive, conceive, and achieve together. And that is the effectual process that entrepreneurs have to go through. You don't know where that's going to end. And that's the interesting thing. When you're tethered to something external to this whole world, you don't like the revenue. If you're diligent in it, you should always, as a business person, be tracking towards that profitable standpoint. But you also know that there could have been a whole nother purpose behind this thing. And so it takes really the pressure off. And when the pressure's off, you start to get this mental margin in your mind to really to serve people. Every intra or entrepreneurial experience I had, I did for free for some period of time, sometimes over a year. And it wasn't because, now, to be honest, there was some sort of hopeful, self-interested end state.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, God had led me to an intersection with that particular people group or whatever that need was. And I felt just impressed. And that's where the Holy Spirit steps in and kind of starts to fill those inadequacies. Just impressed that there is a need here. There is something that needs to be done, and I can do it. I'm in a unique position, just as Esther says, for such a time as this, to step in and fill the gap. And so I'm going to do it. I hope that there's something on the back end of that, in the fleshly sense, and we're going to do the right things. But I have the margin and the opportunity to deal with this now. So I did. And every time God has rewarded that, not always financially and not always in a business sense, but he has rewarded that through relationship and other things. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful that he showed me that lesson to step into and say, hey, there is something that needs to be done there. and to do it and to fix it quick and to do it right, to do it well and to be diligent in that. And I think there's a little bit of a secret sauce, and that's not complicated. You know, there's a hope and a prayer that I said before I came into this is that, you know, nobody needs to listen to this particular time on entrepreneurship and walk away thinking, man, that sounds complicated, because it's not.
No.
You could walk back into your home today or into your community today and look around and say, I can fix that.
Oh man, there are problems lying around everywhere.
That's right.
And like you said, you don't have to look any further than your own home.
That's right.
Right. So what I hear you describing, Seth, is God's call.
Yes.
And I hear from people all the time, just like I know you do. Well, how do I know God's call?
You want me to answer that? Is that
yeah. How did you know God was calling you in there? Well, I mean, I know what my answers are, but I mean, how did you know God was calling you into those situations? So, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Most people say, okay, well, how much are you going to pay me? And you just said you went in for free.
Yeah. No, we got the cart before the horse in a lot of cases in that. And that might sound counterintuitive to a lot of people into the world. And I understand that. You're like, how have you ever been successful in business if you're not getting paid out the gate?
Well, it depends on your definition of success, right?
That's exactly right.
But how do you know God's calling you into a certain situation, whether it's paid or unpaid?
Yeah, I think it looks like work, right? It looks like work that is at your fingertips. And so actually, my wife has me on a little bit of a diet right now. And
how are you on a little bit of a diet? Either are or you aren't, dude.
I'm on a diet right now.
Okay, there you go. And it's nutrition plan. That's what we're supposed to say now.
That's right.
We're not supposed to use the word diet.
I'm making healthy habit changes.
See, you do know the right words.
There you go. Long story short, there for lunch, I had kind of this handful of sunflower seeds.
Okay.
And I was looking at these sunflower seeds and I'm thinking, man, how small and insignificant they seem. But you put these in the ground. I can remember when I was a kid, I lived in Texas, and there was just this great field that just had tons of sunflowers in it. And I loved it as a kid. There was something about these big, massive sunflowers that I thought, how cool. You know, those are the biggest flowers I've ever seen in my life.
Big as your head, right?
And then to think that they come from this seemingly insignificant sunflower kernel seed, right? And then I looked at the nutrition facts on these sunflower seeds, and I thought, man, these things are awesome. Like, they're calorie rich, but the types of calories that you're getting out of these things are just an immense amount of protein and all these things that you really, really need for your body to kind of turn fat into muscle, right? And I'm just looking at that and I'm going, man, you know, the God's calling on your life right now probably seems like something that is incredibly small, but that you're incredibly, even unknowing to you, incredibly equipped to deal with. So step out and do it. You know, we can sit there and we can pray for the $1 million check in the mail all day long, and it's never going to happen. One of my favorite sayings from Dr. Falwell Sr., the founder of Liberty University, was you have got to pray like your life depends on it, but you also have to work like your life depends on it. And if you want this business thing to work for you, you got to get up in the morning and you got to determine that I'm not going to be fearful of failure. I'm not going to be fearful of what others think. I'm not going to be fearful of the unknown and the ambiguous. And I'm not going to give Satan that power over my life. I'm going to step out knowing that if God's taking care of that sparrow, he's going to take care of me. If he's put me here, he's put me here for a reason. Yes. There may not be any expectation of financial return, but I promise you that God will show up in that moment somehow, some way that makes an impact for the kingdom. And if that's your why as a Christian entrepreneur and innovator, if that's the force in which you move, I promise you that will not return void. And that's the thing that people have to keep center focused. It's simple, it's scary, it's hard to do, it's not complicated, but if you do it every time, I promise you, the word of God promises you that he will show up. And that, in and of itself, even if you don't make a dime, that is worthwhile.
What more can you ask for? The presence of God. And that's what we really want at the end of the day, right? I mean, the paycheck's wonderful, but the presence of God, that's what sets it apart, right? That's what really makes it work. So you're on the campus of Liberty University there at the Entrepreneurial Center, the Entrepreneur Center for Innovation at Liberty University. So you're working with people starting businesses, most of them startups, right? Some of them phase one, a few phase twos.
Yeah, at some stage before kind of Series A, IPO type of scenario.
Okay. But you also work with students, because I know I've been on the campus there with you. You also work with students. That's another world, really. So they're pre-startup in a lot of cases. What opportunities is God giving you to influence them with exactly what you just said? Because again, the world is counterintuitive to that. It's saying, I mean, you've heard parents tell their kids, well, you ought to go become a blah, 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 because they make a bunch of money. I mean, it totally you know what I'm talking about? Totally denying the divine design or calling on that child's life.
That's right.
So how do you speak into their lives, the students' lives?
Yeah. If you look at, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everybody kind of starts with this basic need for security and shelter.
Sure.
Things. And I think that's what drives a lot of people through college, right? Get a better paying job, whatever it might be. If we're thinking about this externally and eternally, we know that God's already promised us that, so we don't really need to worry about that. So that frees us up to start thinking about all sorts of different things. So with the students, it's interesting. You always hear this, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of advice. And, I don't know that I fully agree with that. I think what you know helps who you know, right, when you serve them. And I think those are that tying that we're able to create for students here. We're able to introduce them in a lot of ways to the idea of entrepreneurialism and innovation and what that really looks like in the real world. It's not the cover of Fortune or Forbes. Those are outliers. There's about 178, I think, on the Forbes list for unicorn or billion-dollar valuated VC-backed companies in the world right now. There's over 28 million registered companies in the United States alone. So when you do the math on that, the things that are falling on the cover of those magazines aren't the norm. The norm looks a lot different. It does look like the mom and pop shop down the road. It looks like the companies that have 10 to 15 employees. Those are the things that are really building the economy. So dispelling a lot of those myths for them and making introductions to real world entrepreneurs and where they're at, it's kind of the first thing that, we're able to do for them. And to start to reshape that paradigm that our popular society has skewed.
That's amazing, because media does influence so much. I mean, it doesn't tell them that 80% of all jobs in America are because of small businesses. Right. They just look at the magazine covers. That's amazing. So what you really do is you deconstruct the culture's myth around success in business and give them a different model.
That's right. And then once we're able to do that, then really what we're trying to do is we're trying to build great sea captains. The entrepreneurs sail a number of ships throughout their career. And we can get really focused on a particular entity, and we do have focus areas, and those things are helpful in us and making connections and structuring our networks and whatnot. Those are very practical things. But the truth is that we want to build really great sea captains. And what do I mean by that? We want to give them the skills and abilities, and more importantly, behaviors, in order to take advantage of the opportunities around them and where God has placed them. If they are able to start practicing those behaviors now, like on how to identify opportunity and serve others, how to build, support structures around them, on how to build networks, on how to manage leanly initially, how to initially fund and then manage the funds that they receive for their early stage, which is really more research oriented. You're still learning. Yeah,
well, you got to learn about the problem, people who have the problem, how you can best address the problem, that kind of thing.
That's right. If we can give them those, key skills and abilities, and we can build those now and get them building that now, we can hopefully accelerate their development as an individual, so that they have more runway to serve others, to advance the cause, and to kind of build those entities that are impacting the world rather than being impacted by the world. And I think that's the key.
So one of those challenges I hear you talking about is what you mentioned earlier, and that is the movement from narcissism to serving others. And that narcissism parades under that P word, passion.
That's right.
Because I'm passionate about this. Okay, well, it's wonderful that you're passionate about this, but what do people want? What need burdens your heart that people have? So how do you help? I mean, I don't know, we've got time to go into a conversation about millennials. Um, but I mean, the narcissism of the millennial generation, how do you move them beyond that? When I've been on campus with you, though, I found a real openness on the part of these young people to wanting to serve God, and then to follow that call and serve the people that God leads you to.
Yeah. So a lot of times when I introduce myself as a geriatric millennial. I'm like one of the oldest ones you can meet.
A geriatric millennial. Let me get my head wrapped around that. So you're an old young guy? Is that it?
Yeah. Take that down.
I'm just an old guy. That's all I know.
I'll be there one day.
Yeah, if you live long enough, my friend, I hope you make it.
No, so I say that to say this, is that I can empathize and relate to both ends of the spectrum. And I find it curious how quickly we forget what we were like
when we were that age. Yeah,
That's
man, it's so easy because it was all about us. I mean, I'm a boomer, but I mean, it was all about us. Geez, if any generation it was all about, we were as narcissistic or more so than anybody.
Right. I mean, let's just consider Woodstock for just a moment, right?
No, we don't have to go there now, do we're going to peace out here in a minute.
But I say that to say this, is that I will so there is an issue, but it's the same issue that generations have faced before. It's
the same, exactly. And the same one that Christ faced with that generation, which was they thought it was all about themselves, and it wasn't.
That's right.
And that's why
now the interesting thing is that the challenges that surround the world right now, I think, have awoken something in this generation and a desire to contribute back and face those challenges. When you look at the national debt, look at things that are occurring in cybersecurity and in real world conflict in the Middle East and in the rest of the world, when you look at the turmoil with race and religion, and you look at all those things, and I think instantly it has them questioning, which actually to me looks like we're ahead. If I'm going to give a hopeful story, to me it looks like we're ahead, because at least we're aware that, wait a minute, this self-serving thing, I'm there, and maybe I don't fully recognize it, but there's got to be something more. And so you see them pushing the materialism to the side, and you look at that in the buying habits, and you see them searching for more of these socially oriented organizations, and you see them looking for relationship. Facebook was started by a geriatric millennial, right? And all he recognized, with Mark Zuckerberg initially, is this idea that people want to be able to come into contact with other people. Okay. And so creating that relational aspect was very keen. So if that's the case, if they're hyper aware of their need for relationship and their need for something more than just commercial gain, we're ahead. And if we can take that and get them thinking about how that actually translates into positive service, which is what we do here at Liberty University. We train champions for Christ in that Christian service. If we can do that well, then this generation stands to potentially be the greatest generation we've ever seen in America. And isn't that a much different story than the media would like to tell us?
Man, I'm loving it. I am loving it, because it's a story filled with hope, and it's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, if you talk with, even if you're a boomer like myself, if you talk with these millennials anytime at all, you find a sensitivity to other people's needs that you just don't see in a lot of boomers or Xers or anybody else. So kudos to you, my friend, for being on campus, helping them develop that sensitivity in productive kinds of ways, so that we then have almost a social entrepreneurship, an entrepreneurship that really drives towards the heart of people and solving those problems. That's beautiful. Seth Wade is the Executive Director of the Entrepreneurs Center for Innovation at Liberty University. Somebody in Faith Positive Nation is going to want to reach out to you, buddy, and you're going to want to learn more from you about what you're doing there. And I'm sure there's some directors of entrepreneurship at other Christian universities that want to emulate what you're doing. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to provide my email address here at the university.
Wonderful.
I'd be happy to see emails come my way and help in any way that we might be able to add value.
And what's your email address?
It is SAWade, WADE, at liberty.edu.
Okay. And as always, Faith Positive Nation, if you're on the treadmill, don't lose any of those beautiful teeth and that beautiful smile. We got it in the episode copy for you right there. sawade@liberty.edu. So Faith Positive Nation also wants to know from each of our guests about a favorite Bible verse or Bible passage. You got one?
Yeah, I like Proverbs 28:1. And I believe this may be the same one I shared last time, but it hasn't changed. When I was a young man, it meant one thing, and today it might mean something else. But Proverbs 28:1 says, "The wicked flee when no man pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion." And I think it's because we understand that we're dependent and covered by Christ and God's dominion, and that should make us bold in taking risks, which gives us a fair advantage.
That's right. It's an unfair advantage over the rest of the world, right? That we Christian business professionals have, because we do know how to increase our faith, how to get greater joy at work, and how to love God and others more. Seth Wade, thank you so much. I pray God's blessings on you, upon Liberty University, upon your beautiful wife and those great kids of yours, man. Just pray God's blessings on you in all ways. Thanks so much for the gift of your time today.
Thank you too.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.